Nairobi, summer 2011. A visit by a person of exceptional importance is awaited. All the media in Kenya are eager to be there when the guest arrives. He is a religious leader, a diplomat, an aristocrat, and a citizen of the world. Nairobi is only one among the many places where he is active. Karim Aga Khan arrives with his daughter, Princess Zara. He is someone who makes a lasting impression on everyone he meets.
Someone who's passionately concerned about the well-being of people all over the world.
He's really empathetic. He's really putting of himself into the world.
What an extraordinarily thoughtful, careful, but daring thinker he is.
His vision of the world, how it should be, how we can help to have a better world for our next generations.
There's this integrity about what I feel he represents, which is just a very powerful thing.
When His Highness comes, it's really his interest and appreciation of the work that is being done here that makes a big difference.
The Aga Khan and Kenyan President Kibaki are to open the new Heart and Cancer Research Centre today at the Aga Khan University Hospital, which was built in 1958. It is part of the Aga Khan Development Network, which maintains 325 health facilities in Asia and Africa. These are non-profit institutions, initiated by the Aga Khan and sponsored by himself, donors, and the Ismaili community. His father, Prince Ali Khan, who was married to Rita Hayworth, was a regular guest at high society parties during the post-war years and was well known for his lavish lifestyle. His son, Karim, is still frequently associated with some of the passions of his father, such as racehorses.
They were an accident in my life because obviously I didn't expect my father to be killed in a car accident. But it had been a family tradition for 3 generations in India and then in Europe. And I was a little bit in 2 minds as to whether this was something that I wanted to continue. I knew nothing about it. So it meant learning something which was not part of my institution, but it was part of my family. And I decided to continue so.
Karim, with his brother Amin and their grandfather Aga Khan III, who was president of the League of Nations in 1937. Geneva was the headquarters of this organization, and it was here that Karim was born in 1936. He went to school first in Nairobi and then to the Swiss boarding school and studied Islamic history at Harvard. His mother was English, and he is a British citizen.
I think as a young man, I mean, obviously I'm not an Ismaili and I don't have a kind of mystical take on his personhood, which other people do. But having followed his career over the years, you could see that as a young man at Harvard, he was actually quite serious. He wasn't the playboy he's often described as being. He studied hard, and then suddenly in his final year, or his sophomore year, he inherits the imamate, and he has this, this huge burden sort of thrust upon him.
After the death of his grandfather in 1957, the imamate was transferred to Karim Aga Khan. Since then, he has been Imam of the Shia Imami Ismaili Muslims, which have around 15 million followers in 25 countries. For the Muslims, knowledge is a divine gift, and as such, the Ismailis see reason as a facet of faith.
The Imam was always revered as the as it were, current embodiments of the spirit of Ali and Muhammad in the present time. But they were also active participants in the secular world.
Doha in Qatar, a city on the Arabian Peninsula. Karim Aga Khan presented the Aga Khan Award for Architecture 2010 in Doha and drew the attention of the West to this part of the world in the process.
From the point of view of the Muslim world, one of the major difficulties we have is that we have been completely absent from the notion of Western civilized world. Within the Western civilized world, you teach about the plurality of language, the plurality of philosophy, religion, culture. But until very recently, the definition of an educated person did not include knowledge of the Islamic world.
The award ceremony took place in this building designed by the Chinese architect I.M. Pei. Pei undertook a long study tour through the Islamic world before he began work on planning the Museum for Islamic Art.
The Islamic world is amazingly powerful in the domain of the humanities, but the Western world has never really seen that. And I believe that that is one of the possible foundations for a real dialogue, is in the whole domain of art, culture, philosophy, these domains which are completely absent from the dialogue.
His Highness Karim Aga Khan. The title His Highness was given to him by Queen Elizabeth II in 1957, is greeted by the Sheikh of Qatar as an official guest of state and also as the host of the award ceremony. The Aga Khan has frequently been honoured for his continuing commitment to promoting the understanding between the Islamic and the Western world. A project in Saudi Arabia receives an award for the ecological transformation of a wadi, a largely dry river valley in the desert.
Mr. Roderick MacDonald, Chairman, Borough.
10 years ago, a start was made in achieving environmental compatibility in agriculture and tourism. The Tunisian architect Faika Bejaoui accepts an award on behalf of her team for the successful restoration and revitalization of what is known as the new city area of Tunis, with buildings dating from the French colonial period. The young Chinese architect Li Jiadong attracted extensive media coverage for his award-winning village school in southeastern China. The Aga Khan Award for Architecture gives prominence to projects around the world beyond the major metropolis centers.
When the award started, it set itself a number of goals, and one of the goals was to impact public opinion.
International experts have met every 3 years since 1977 to decide on the winners of one of the most important architecture prizes in the world. Around 1,000 experts support the committee. One of the jury members is Glenn Lowry, director of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. For the shortlisted projects, the success at solving ecological and social problems is critical.
Would you say that architecture is a passion of you?
It's a passion, yes. I mean, it's obviously an extraordinary art form, but it's also central to quality of life. I was worried about an award that would be seen as an urban initiative. And keep in mind that most of the countries that I work in, the demography is 70–75% rural. So the first question is, what can you do to improve the habitat in rural environments? And therefore, you have to then say, how do rural environments change? Well, they don't change because a great architect's come to work in a village. We're not talking about architecture in the narrow meaning of the word. We're talking about the change processes in the built environment.
One of the award-winning projects for 2010 typifies this intention. It is a school bridging a gorge, which formerly divided the village of Xiaxi in southeastern China into two separate communities. The children from both sides can now enter their school directly, and no one needs to make a long detour any longer. The young architect Li Jiadong collected the money he needed to build the school himself. Although it was originally planned to serve only as a school, the villagers now use the building as a library and as a centre for community events. The Aga Khan Award for Architecture was given not only in recognition of the architecture, but also because this project has significantly improved the lives of the local people. In Nairobi, the morning also begins for many people with a newspaper. Karim Aga Khan launched one of these papers, the Daily Nation, over 50 years ago. As a young imam, he decided to give East Africa a voice of its own in the difficult transition phase from the colonial period to independence. Nairobi is a city of contrasts. There is a prosperous business centre, as well as slums, teeming with hundreds of thousands of inhabitants. 50 years ago, there were still other unsolved problems that had to be dealt with.
One of the questions I had was whether the African political leaders were aware of answerability to the public, and there was no African reporting on African politics, African ambitions, aspirations, and I felt that that was very dangerous.
3 years after the Daily Nation was first published, Kenya became independent. An international supervisory board monitors the nation to the highest standards of journalism and ethics, a requirement which comes from Karim Aga Khan.
He had the resources to hire people to do things, but of course that's not quite enough. You don't just hire people. You have to trust them, you have to decide to back them, you have to go with what they ask for in terms of facilities and resources and so forth.
The Nation Media Group is a company that has been quoted on the stock exchange since the early 1970s. Karim Aga Khan is currently building a new media training college for aspiring young journalists.
People expect the nation to stand up for their rights. They expect us to stand up for justice. They expect us to have the courage to speak up for those who are oppressed, for those who are disadvantaged, for those who don't have a voice. But in an era when technology, the world has become a global village, people also expect the nation to set the pace for change. They expect us to understand what is going on in the world and to be among the first to adopt it.
Bamiyan, in central Afghanistan. This is where the Taliban destroyed the world-famous Buddha statues. The Aga Khan network was able to mobilize $700 million from governments and other organizations for the reconstruction of the infrastructure.
I think that in the work that I do, listening is one of the most important factors, because the voices are so diverse in a given country. Imagine the difference in the voices between rural communities and urban communities. Just that one factor, which is a dominant factor in much of Asia and Africa. Just that is very important. The change in perceptions of people from generation to generation is very, very important indeed. The changing value systems. Think of the difference between the value systems of 1957 and the value systems of 2011.
He has been imam since 1957. Over 80,000 people in 30 countries work in this network, one of the world's largest development aid organizations. Within this network, there are profitable projects and others that need financial support, such as this hospital in Bamiyan. These are supported by the Aga Khan Foundation, which was established from the Imam's own wealth and now draws support from governments and other organizations. Additional support is provided by the Ismaili community. Active commitment to good causes is part of the ethical framework of the Ismaili faith. Numerous facilities trace their origins to their volunteer work. More than 5,000 nurses have so far been trained in Aga Khan network educational facilities.
There's hardly a day where I'm not in contact with people around the world. That's the nature of the institution. It knows no time.
An Aga Khan project in Kenya, near Nairobi. Smallholders have grown beans here since 1989, securing their autonomy and independence. It would, in fact, be cheaper to plant and harvest the beans using machinery, but the result would be that 75,000 smallholders in Kenya would lose their income. What's more, the manual fieldwork assures the remarkably high quality of the crop, and with this, the economic success of the project.
I always, ask myself, well, what can we do as a community, an international community, to contribute to quality of life? And if we're able to build programs and institutions which contribute, then that's a good thing.
Frigoken is a project of the Aga Khan Fund for Economic Development. The fund is known in short as ACFED and has an annual turnover of $2.3 billion. All profits are ploughed back into the activities of the development network. The focus of these projects is on the poor countries of the developing world, irrespective of their religion or ethnic origins.
When we look at programs or institutions, what we try to do is really to understand the dynamics of the situation in which we're working. And then we do take quite a long time to prepare the initiative, whatever it is. Because one of the concerns I have in the developing world, which is clear, is that if you engage a process and you find that the process does not give you the results you want, that's failure. And failure is very, very costly, much more costly in poor countries than it is in rich countries.
There is no question of failure in this project. The women smallholder farmers of the Gatumbu Centre ensure that Frigoken is the world market leader for fine beans. The women farmers bring their harvests from the surrounding fields to the village square, where the quality and fineness of the beans is checked. Immediately after this inspection, the best of the crop is taken by truck to Nairobi, about a 1.5-hour drive away, where it is processed in the project factory. Each farmer brings her daily harvest to be weighed, and when this is done, she knows exactly what she has earned this afternoon. The prices are fixed at the start of the season. 80% of the farmers under project contract are women. Each contract is concluded individually and includes the quantity each farmer agrees to deliver and the purchase guarantee. Frigoken is one of the most successful projects of the Aga Khan Fund for Economic Development. Some 2,500 people are employed at the bean factory in Nairobi. Most of them are women. They process 60 tons of beans a day.
When the project started, the farmers used to work on a basis of speculative growing, and they would work with middlemen. The brokers would buy the beans from the farmers and take them to exporters who were essentially traders. Therefore, the farmers did not have any form of contracts or any form of guaranteed price or market. It was pure speculation.
Frigoken is one of 90 projects of the Aga Khan Fund for Economic Development. which employs over 40,000 people in 23 countries. Mostly they are volatile countries, where foreign companies fear to invest. ACFED operates banks, electricity companies, hotels and airlines in Africa, and a telecommunications company in Kabul. Profits are ploughed back into new projects. ACFED works together with governments, international companies and financial institutions, and with donors. The aim of all the projects is to create profitable and sustainable companies. Healthcare, as in Frigoken, is part and parcel of all this effort, as is the advancement of women.
We have a creche. This is particularly unique for this part of the world, where the creche caters for babysitting children between the ages of 3 months to 3 years.
This project has been in existence since 2002. In East Africa alone, the Early Childhood Programme supports 500 schools. Education is offered to the children in nursery schools and schools, increasing their chances of a better life.
President Aga Khan is very, very keen on education, improving education of his people, and certainly the no restrictions on the kind of way education is approached.
Oh, eyes over there.
Good morning, good morning.
Say good morning, His Highness.
Good morning, Your Highness. Please go on, I'm going to join the class.
All right, welcome.
The Aga Khan Academy in Mombasa was established in 2003, the first of 18 academies planned for Africa, Asia and the Middle East. It is a private school with an entrance examination and fees dependent on parent income. Many talented pupils without means receive grants. Pupils get an education of the highest international standards from nursery school through to university entrance examinations. His grandfather, Aga Khan III, was already convinced that the future of a society depends on the education of women.
Way back in the 1890s, and that was before women had the vote in Britain, he was telling his people, said, look, if you have 2 children, a boy and a girl, and you can't afford to educate both of them, you educate the girl, because she's the person who's going to bring up the family. She's the person who's going to give culture, provide the kind of cultural matrix.
At the Aga Khan University in Karachi, Pakistan, Kareem Aga Khan awards diplomas to women who have received a further qualification here as nurses, teachers or doctors. They come from Pakistan, Bangladesh, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, Kenya, but also from the USA and Canada. Fees depend on the income of the students and their families. The university was founded in 1983. There are twice as many female as male students.
The social history of communities in the Islamic world is not even. It's very different between the African world, the Asian world, the Arab world, etc. So the first thing, I think it's wrong to say that there is any form of unanimity around these issues, because they are social issues. So I think one has to be aware of the fact that although there's a big debate in the Western world, ultimately the Islamic world says, how do you protect the dignity of women? And the rules are not only for women. The Western world very often says that the Islamic world looks only at the status of women. It doesn't. It looks at men's behavior in relation to women. And there are guidelines on that which are equally clear. So it's much more a protection of women within society that is at the basis of these issues.
This is because women are judged here by their abilities and not their gender. Dina Bakoum is director of the Aga Khan Cultural Services Restoration Project in Cairo. She is convinced that the equal treatment of men and women is a matter of course for her employer, Karim Aga Khan. Her abilities as a technical engineer are acknowledged, not least on the construction site. The fact that she is a Coptic Christian is not an issue here. The Blue Mosque gets its name from the 17th century tiles, copies of which are here being transferred to extremely thin plastic sheeting. Why are photographs not sufficient?
We usually do photographic documentation, of course, of all these detailed tiles, but it's also very important to have our other architectural fine documentation where you can exactly mark the cracks, you know, you can study the typology of these tiles, and you have that as your reference. So they really do have the patience to do that. I always say it's passion and patience at the same time, you know, so they do it slowly, 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 but if you don't like it, if you don't enjoy it, the result will not be good.
The women on the scaffolding are trained restoration specialists.
It's something that I notice often, that people from abroad are more surprised actually than us, you know. But maybe this is also the thought about women here in Egypt, you know, that, oh, they don't work and they have to stay at home and so on. Many of these women are actually married and they have children and they manage to come and they go on the scaffolding. So this is actually the reality of things here in Egypt. Yes, it is true that, for example, we don't have women carving stones or plastering walls, you know. We don't have this here on the side.
The history of the Blue Mosque dates back to the 14th century. It was visibly falling into decay before Karim Aga Khan commissioned the restoration work. Professional skills and knowledge are the factors which determine who can join the team. Religious beliefs and social backgrounds do not have a role here.
I think our project is the bridge in itself, you know. We do have people from different social backgrounds, we do have people from different religions, from different age groups, and it is this time that we spent here together. We spend more time here than we spent at home, you know, so you really get to have the people work together, understand each other, because as much as, you know, of course we live with each other in Egypt. It's not like people are segregated according to age or religion or, you know, gender or anything, but also talking to each other, understanding each other, and you really remove prejudice.
It is not only about valuing each individual. The Aga Khan explains.
You bring to societies a new sense of dignity when you bring value to their cultural and historic assets. You remind them of the history of their own countries.
The Aga Khan personally checks whether this project theory is really being implemented in practice.
When His Highness comes and talks to our team, you know, and to us, and gives us ideas and asks us questions, it's a very comforting interaction, and it really shows that he appreciates the work that we are doing and the effort that everybody is doing. So it's more than anything you can wish for.
The buildings date back to the Fatimids, who made Cairo their capital city at the end of the 10th century.
Cairo was founded by my ancestors, so there's a long historical connection with that city. But in addition to that, it is one of the great cultural centers of the Islamic world and of the Arab world.
Cairo's old city, with its rich Islamic cultural heritage, had long fallen into decay. It was only after Karim Aga Khan began to restore some historic monuments that a change of attitude set in. But first, facts on the ground had to be taken into account.
The population that becomes urbanized looks to enter into the city at the least cost And therefore, the historic city, which has no ownership, no laws, nothing, people come in, go out, that was a concentration of the ultra-poor.
It was important that these people should benefit from the measures and not be driven from their homes, as so often happens. The residents should have a share in the changes. Dina Bakoum has worked for a number of years in Darb al-Ahmar and sees one of her tasks as involving local people in the changes.
One of the things and the ways that we try to involve people in the project is really to have them work with us in the project, you know. So they come and they get some jobs with us, especially for craftsmanship from the neighborhood, those like carpenters who exist here in the neighborhood, and we ask them to work with us. We started with the facades, and they really saw progress going on, and they started to see the decoration and this beautiful carvings and colors appearing on the facade, and they started to really appreciate the efforts being done in this mosque.
People enjoy using a public open space, and no one asks whether it was a Sunni, a Shia or a Coptic Christian who was behind it.
Cairo was originally a city built by the Shia, by ourselves. But it had, very early on, a Sunni majority, and there was a complete, open, pluralist society. I would hope that that sort of vision of pluralism would be acceptable around the world. Unfortunately, that's not the case.
The Ismailis are a Shia community, representing a small minority amongst Muslims. The majority of Muslims are Sunni. Karim Aga Khan, a Shia Imam, commissioned the restoration of Sunni mosques, a symbolic act of tolerance and pluralism. There are no Ismailis living in Cairo. Improving the quality of life for the poorest, irrespective of their beliefs, is the mandate of the Imam. Here in Cairo and all over the world, including as far away as in Central Asia. The Aga Khan is the spiritual leader of around 15 million followers. For these people, he is the direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad through his cousin and son-in-law Ali, the first Imam, and Ali's wife, Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet Muhammad. The Aga Khan is the 49th hereditary Imam of the Ismaili Muslims. To see him, to meet him, and to be blessed by him is of great significance.
He exists in people's hearts, regardless of whether he wants to be there, he is there. And this is something they've grown up with, they feel very special about him. And the question, I suppose, that leads to is, well, how does he use this? He could just sit there and say, thanks very much, I'm going to have a lovely time. And I think an awful lot of people would, a lot of the Ismailis would simply go along with that, because that's part of that tradition, was you give to the Imam. But what he's done is, I think, very remarkable. He's converted it into an engine for, not just for improving his own community, but for extending its knowledge, its welfare, its understanding of the world to peripheral or communities surrounding his community, which become the beneficiaries.
The Aga Khan could not enter Afghanistan in 1998 because of the civil war that was raging. So he decided to bless his followers from across the river in Tajikistan instead. Many thousands flocked to see him across the river.
Afghanistan, as you know, has been a very, very serious problem. And so this is one of the situations where we're dealing with a post-conflict area. And there the question is, what are the priorities? And the priority number one, obviously, is security. That's the first thing. The second thing is food. So your processes of support are more driven by notions of protection than development.
A civil war broke out in Central Asia in the 1990s, following the collapse of the Soviet Union. Thousands of Ismailis were threatened by death from starvation in East Tajikistan. Karim Aga Khan sent thousands of tons of food to the country through Kyrgyzstan.
On this day of joy and happiness, and at the beginning of this irshad, I convey to all my murids my most affectionate and most loving blessings. And I pray that Allah may bring all of you here present and to your families and homes peace and hope in the future.
So in this decision to go there, it was even dangerous for you, I think.
The Imam has to go and be there when it's necessary for him to be there, you know.
Kabul, a city tormented by war. People who are usually only mentioned in the media when they become the victims of war. Nothing would seem less likely than the dream of a harmoniously flourishing garden in this war-desolated city. But this is precisely what Karim Aga Khan did. The restoration of the 500-year-old and utterly neglected Mughal gardens of Baghe Babur was made possible by the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, a foundation dedicated to the renovation of historic cities and monuments. Karim Aga Khan was able to reconstruct and replant the garden of Baghe Babur with the help of the German Foreign Office. In order to do this, he needed influence, a great deal of diplomatic tact, and political independence.
I think when the history is eventually written, which won't be in his lifetime, people will look back on Karim Aga Khan. They will say this was actually a remarkably influential figure, and perhaps one nobody knew about. He's been around for a very long time. Other leaders come and go. He's always there. And there's a repository of wisdom and experience there.
Karim Aga Khan was not deterred by the chaos in Cairo. For 20 years, he pursued a remarkable idea that was never given a single line in the tabloid press.
Cairo was the of the great city with no open space. So we started looking at the issue of open space, and we found this dump ground of 32 hectares. Imagine a city of that age with, in the middle, in the most historic part of the city, 32 hectares with no building on it. So it seemed to me that this was a historic opportunity.
A giant 500-year-old rubbish dump in the center of Cairo's old city. Over 1 million cubic meters of waste and rubbish accumulated through centuries needed to be dug up and transported away. By 1999, the 12th century Cairo city walls had reappeared. These had long been completely buried under the rubbish.
This is extraordinary. You know, it's much more dramatic than anybody could describe in writing. You know, you actually have to see this.
Karim Aga Khan, Imam of the Shia Ismailis, born in Geneva, educated in Harvard, invests in the maintenance of historic Islamic architecture as a reference point for the contemporary world.
It was a massive challenge, and it's one of the most exciting projects in the sense that it started with a certain concept, and as we moved forwards in that concept, various phases justified the next ones.
Al-Azhar Park is the result of 20 years of effort. Green areas available in the city were formerly the size of a single footprint per person. The $30 million costs have been borne by the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. The park must now pay its own way through an entrance fee paid by 2 million visitors every year.
And one of the serious questions in developing countries is what happens to leisure time? How do people use the leisure time that they have?
Visitors to this garden benefit from the wealth of its initiator. Helping others and the obligation of charitable giving is one of the basic obligations in the 5 pillars of Islam.
So what do gardens mean personally to you?
The rare opportunity to go and relax.
El Sadi Badawi made the first shocking soil analyses in 1994. Today, he is the mind and soul of the park. He coordinates the work of 10 gardeners and 30 workers, and he always knows exactly what must be done. He teaches botany at the university in Cairo and developed the planting concept from the start in close coordination with Karim Aga Khan. Badawi and his team created Aga Khan parks in Aleppo, Syria, in Stonetown, Zanzibar, in Korog, Tajikistan, and in Bamako, Mali. The next major park project is planned for Nairobi. Since most people in Cairo have never experienced nature, they first learn about it when they come to the park. Years passed before it was possible to establish the first healthy plants in Al-Azhar Park. As a result of the 500-year-old rubbish dump, the quality of the soil was so poor that all plants died within 2 days. Today, 98% of the plants thrive here.
He was controlling everything, from the very small thing to the very big thing. He is a special taste for choosing everything. Well, prototype, he decided with the, of course, with the consultant, what do you mean, and he has his idea for that.
This park has changed Cairo, and it has also changed and significantly improved the lives of the 200,000 inhabitants of Darb al-Ahmar. They have suddenly found themselves living in a district that possesses one of the world's most beautiful city parks.
What makes you really content? What is really something you're proud of? And,
No, I don't have a sense of pride. I don't have that at all. I'm happy if some of the work that's done creates responses which help people live in a better quality of life. That does make me happy, but it would make any normal person happy.